Welcome, everybody, to the Sonoma Spiel. My name is Tim Zahner with the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau. Every week, we bring you fascinating characters from Sonoma Valley and talk about the issues and what's happening. And before I get into my introduction, I want to say, today I went to the farmer's market like I always do, and there was a guy playing music. He was phenomenal. He was doing a great job. The bocce people were out there fighting each other, and I got a really good seasonal fruit galette from Baker & Cook. So, Jen, thank you for that. It was fantastic. Got a little bit of nitro coffee from Timothy at Yeehaw Coffee, which is why I'm still flying a little high. And I can see tomorrow. It looks fine. The amount of caffeine per ounce is, it's really, really, really high. So it's good times there on Sonoma Plaza. Going to have a big race coming in, the Napa to Sonoma Half Marathon. Welcome, everybody, for that run. I'm not going to run, but I really support you. But, folks, I know I say every week that I have a very special guest. And I know you guys think, oh, Tim, you always say that. I also say I don't know much about history. I don't know much about biology. I don't know much psychology. But I do know that my next guest is really amazing. I'd like to introduce everybody to my very special guest, George Weber. George, how are you?
I am happy to be here with you, Mr. Tim Zahner, the smartest guy in the world of tourism.
You know, George, I need a hype man, and you're my guy. Like, you just...
I'm there for you.
You're just like...
I've known you since 2003.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned that.
20 years.
Thanks, George. Thanks. And when you walked in, you said, I remember when you had hair. And
no, there's that.
I love that. So, wow, it's been that, it has been that
That's
long.
how long it's been.
Holy cramoly.
You had very nice hair, too.
Thank you.
Abundant swaths of furry hair.
That's right. And my beard was just nothing but brown the whole back then. Barely. And now it's a little...
I just remember the hair, the curly, beautiful
curly
hair.
Locks. So gorgeous.
Like a long, beautiful hair.
So, George, that's actually apropos, because the reason why you're here is that you are a history guy.
Fact.
You are a history guy. Because, like, I was going to introduce you as, like, the Count as one of your characters, or Mark Twain, or a guy that does walking tours. And those are all true. Right?
Indeed.
Right? But you're like, what are you, George? Why are you here? What's going on? You love history. Talk to me.
I have always loved history, Tim, from an early age, and I've also loved acting. Okay. And so for the last 20 years, my mission is to combine these two things. Because I believe that for people to understand and appreciate history, they need to have it presented to them in a fun and entertaining way.
No, I think it should just be boring facts. I disagree with you 100%. Take out your pencils.
And interestingly, when people tell me history is so boring, I never really understand what they're talking about. Right. Even when it was just facts.
Right.
To me, the facts seemed amazing.
Right.
And I've always been fascinated by the panoply of incredible stories that appear in history.
Okay, and this is for people who don't know, for the 5 people who left in the universe, because you are the master of getting your story out, you talk about history, but you actually become characters. And that's how you do. You don't just lecture, right? You inhabit that person and tell their story.
A theatrical performance based on real study of history.
Okay.
So I got a degree in politics and political history. So I've been studying history for a very long time, and I've also been acting since I was 7 years old.
Really?
Yes.
Where? Like the community theater?
I am from Des Moines, Iowa, and I was a product of a community theater children's theatrical program.
No way.
What
kind of plays did you do back then?
I was the star of Peter Pumpkin Eater. In fact, I was Peter.
You played the pumpkin. Oh, okay.
I was Peter.
Okay. You were Peter.
Yeah.
You were the star.
And I'll tell you a story. So,
I expect nothing less.
I was 12, and we're playing to 3 to 8-year-olds.
As a core demographic.
And for a children's theater.
Right.
And the thing about acting in front of 3 to 8 and 9-year-olds is that if it's done correctly, they forget they're at a play.
Okay.
It becomes real to them.
The willful suspension.
And you know exactly whether you have them or not.
Oh, right.
Adults can sit on their stool and be quiet and go
polite.
And just,
but their minds are wandering.
And they'll just fall asleep. But children, when you've lost them, they're talking, they're moving, they're getting up out of their seat, they're wandering into the hall.
Right.
So, but the pregnant attention of a 5-year-old who who believes that what's in front of him is real,
Right.
is palpable.
Right.
You can feel it. And so I recall I was 12 as Peter, and my task, I was the very beginning of the play, the first person. I'm behind the big curtain.
Okay.
Well, this was performed at a major. I mean, it was a children's theater that's part of a community playhouse.
Okay.
So this wasn't a small stage or playhouse. There's
Right,
800 seats.
In Des Moines.
Yeah, in Des Moines, which is a major city for
No, it is.
Iowa.
Des Moines, yes.
We don't say that, but
don't say Des Moines?
we call it Death Moines, actually. But
There you are,
so
12 years
I'm
old.
behind the curtain, and I remember being really excited. And my task is the curtain's going to go up, and then I'm going to run. And there's a set is a 2-foot high fence, and my task is to jump over the fence and then start my lines.
So you do your own stunts.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be a stunt, but it turned out to be because I didn't really quite get it over the fence fully with my left foot and dragged, and I knocked down this whole set. The whole thing just came crashing down, and I turned around and I said, "They're not building fences like they used to," and the audience got a big laugh.
Good job.
Big laugh.
Good job.
And I went, "That's it.
You soaked it all in.
That's what I want to do."
Oh, sweet nectar of attention.
Yes. But when I was 14, our teacher, who was very good, very talented, said, "If any of you, my students, are thinking of being an actor for a living, then here's my advice. Only do this if there's nothing else you can do to be happy.
Okay.
Because if that's the case, you will almost certainly have a tough life.
Right.
Being an actor as a profession is almost impossible."
Yeah.
To this day, people are in these SAG and AFTRA unions.
Yeah.
And these are people who have actually been paid professionally at least once, because otherwise you can't get in the union.
Okay.
Of those people, 2% make a living at it.
The other 90.
And they're in the union.
They're just passionate 90. So
It's almost impossible. So I never thought about making a living as an actor, but I have always used this training and my sensibility in other ways. And over the last 20 years, it's been about presenting original theatrical performances. I write, produce, direct, create,
right.
history, acting on the streets of Sonoma in the plaza, and then at Buena Vista Winery for 10 years when I was the count, and I wrote a living history play every year, an original play about Mariano Vallejo, the Count, Mark Twain, Joaquin Murrieta,
Were
and
all these
other
people
characters.
in Sonoma, or are they Sonoma inspired?
Well, I did have one play set in San Francisco where everyone was present.
Okay.
So all the plays could have happened
Right.
as far as the dates.
Theoretically,
They could have happened.
It's like alternative history,
Precisely.
or historical fiction, or something like that.
But they're true because I know the characters so well. So when I write these, the characters tell me what their lines should be. And so there's a feeling of reality to it, even though, of course, it is made up.
So I want to talk about the Buena Vista thing. It's a historic winery here in Sonoma. The first commercial winery, perhaps, in California.
Probably true. There's different ways to look at it,
Always
but you know, you could say that it's the first really large-scale European-style winery in California.
Okay, and not like a Mission, which was doing sacramental wines. This was doing wine for sale, right?
Correct.
We actually had the Spanish and the Russians had wine they brought from Europe.
General Vallejo was the first commercial winemaker of the Sonoma Valley.
Got it.
He was making wine and selling commercially in 1839.
Okay.
So, but he wasn't a big European-style commercial winery, so that's why I prefer to use that phrase.
So you, I think, were the only historical reenactor on a winery payroll ever.
And to this day, the only one.
Still the best.
Well, I'm the very best, and I'm the only one that's ever done it.
What was the character that you portrayed at Buena Vista Winery?
Well, Count Agoston Haraszthy, the Hungarian founder of Buena Vista, was a tremendously interesting character, and I was hired in 2011 to portray the Count at tours and create a touring operation at the winery. And then in about 6 months, I became the brand ambassador for the winery.
Okay.
And my task was to travel around America up to 20 weeks a year and I sold wine directly into the market.
As the Count.
As the Count. And I would walk in looking like this with a top hat, and I would go into a grotty package store in Providence, Rhode Island, and the owner would look up with a strange look in his face, and I would say, "Hello, I am Count Agoston Haraszthy. Would you like to try my wine?" And he would say, "That's weird, but you have my attention."
Wait, you wouldn't make a reservation? You'd walk in as the Count to do cold sale?
So we would work with our distributor partners.
Okay.
So these are our appointments.
Gotcha. So they kind of knew you were coming at least.
They knew we were coming.
You weren't like some guy off the street. Like,
I'm
here from the 1840s.
This is a very big
wine.
commercial enterprise, and I would go in. Typically, they would want 5 to 7 appointments a day.
Oh gosh.
And if it was less than that, then they'd get yelled at.
The distributors.
Because Boisset, Jean-Charles Boisset, who
the
hired
with
me,
the socks,
who was a lovely fellow and quite brilliant, hired me to do this. And
probably the smartest thing he's ever done.
I completely agree. And so it was a wonderful 10 years.
Right.
And then I got older. There's something called Medicare.
What's that like? I'm a Gen X. I don't know what that is.
You'll find out if it's still available when you get older.
Keep working, millennials. Yeah. So Sorry. You retired as champion as Count Agoston Haraszthy. I can't pronounce his name. Say it again.
Well, so Val Haraszthy, who lives in this town, who is the great-great-grandson of the Count, and so he has a right to use his name. He says Haraszthy.
Haraszthy.
As a fake Hungarian, I would say Haraszthy.
What happened to the Count? Like, did he retire from the winemaking business?
The Count is a sad story.
Oh.
The Count created Buena Vista, a tremendously successful winery at the time.
Yeah.
In 1863, formed a modern corporation, the Buena Vista Vinicultural Society, and sold $600,000 of stock in 1863.
Wow.
This is around $20 million in today's funds.
And you're about 15 years after the gold rush of California. So
1863, sure.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Okay.
That actually is the correct number. Thank you. You're doing the math very well. 1848, 15 years. And so his belief was that the perfect soil and weather in Sonoma and California in general would make it possible that eventually California would export more dollars worth of wine even than that of gold.
Which we do.
Oh, certainly now.
Right now, yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So he started at Buena Vista, a modern European commercial winery. He brought in the most modern of equipment from France and Germany.
Right.
And he had a steam press.
Okay.
He had the press room that you can visit today had 2-inch leather belts snaking all through it, run by a steam engine.
And a guy named Stumpy, I'm sure.
Well,
you could lose a finger in there.
Happens.
Yeah, jeez.
And it was a huge success. Sadly, an unknown vine disease began destroying the vines as early as 1860. Just a few vines at first. By 1866, half the grapevines were dead.
Is it known now, the name of this
disease?
It
is now. It's called phylloxera, of course.
That sounds awful.
And it's likely the Count himself brought the root louse, the aphid, almost invisible, 1/20th of an inch.
Okay.
Brought the grapevine, the louse, when he acquired some root ball sacks of grapevines from New Jersey.
So we have New Jersey. Just for the record, so far we've pissed off Iowans by saying that their community theater is good, but it's called Des Moines. Now we're upsetting New Jerseyans. Thank you. Is anybody else?
But they do such a good job of insulting themselves. It doesn't matter.
So the phylloxera, did he just retire?
So then, sadly, in 1866, was fired by the corporation
from his own company.
His
own company. Okay.
Well, you see, the thing is that he was either a rube or overly optimistic, because when he sold stock in the company, he kept 48% of the stock.
So I know you've got a history of knowing about finance. So does that
wasn't quite enough.
So he doesn't control it.
Now he was the largest shareholder in a. I mean,
well, then he wins.
There
clearly,
was 6, 10%, 5%. It may never have occurred to him that if all of them banded together,
right,
they could force him out.
So you're giving me a business tip that if you have a corporation, 51%.
Yes, yes, very important.
Or 50% plus one, I guess, or whatever.
Whatever.
Right.
As long as
majority.
Yes, a majority. So he was fired, and then they declared his stock portion worthless.
You can do that.
Well, so this is in 1863. So, that's been a good question over the years. And the answer is, well, we don't know, but they did it. Okay. And so the Count was bankrupt. He was devastated, but he had a dream because he was an expert brandy maker. Oh. And therefore he knew how to distill.
Oh, like the Corbel boys were Hungarians. Weren't they out there in Gurnville?
Well, they're I believe, or Germans or Swiss.
Oh, okay, something. But like so.
And that was about 15 years later.
Okay.
But in 1862, a man named Bacardi began a rum distillery in Cuba or Cuba.
I've heard of it.
And so he's done fairly well for himself over the years.
Okay.
So he decided, the Count, Agoston Haraszthy, decided to move to Nicaragua.
Okay.
And distill rum and make his fortune back.
He's going to do rum.
To distill rum.
Rum, okay.
And so he went to Nicaragua. He formed a partnership with a sugar cane plantation owner.
Oh, dear. Okay.
As rum is made from sugar cane.
Right.
And things were going very well until July 6, 1869, when he was exploring the sugar cane plantation, crossing a river on a tree that grew over the river.
Oh, like a bridge, like a natural
bridge. A natural bridge. And there were crocodiles in the river. He grabbed a hold of a branch. It broke in his hand. He slipped and fell into the river and was eaten by a crocodile. And I have had ladies jump up out of their chair, 3/4 drunk, at a Count dinner at a country club, jump and go, no!
That was like being in Peter Pumpkin Eater.
It was the next step from Peter, right Agoston Haraszthy. It's a direct link.
So poor Augustine disappears into the belly, perhaps, of a crocodile, along with
true. Yes, sad.
It's a sad story. Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing that sad story here, George.
My task is to tell this sad story. That's one reason why I love the job, but after 10 years of killing myself off by crocodile 5 times a day, you just can't do it anymore.
Like, ladies of
it's too depressing.
Of the Plano Country Club, thus ends my career.
Oh, I was the king of the third-tier market. I was in Providence, Rhode Island, Des Moines, Iowa. St. Petersburg, Florida, Dallas, Houston. They loved the Count. I was better known as a wine personality out there than here because, curiously, although many of us make a living from wine here in Sonoma, no one actually cares about wine at all.
George, not true.
People
care about wine.
They don't.
People don't care about wine historian crocodile.
They don't care about wine at all. They drink it. They drank it. So you know what? What's Sonoma?
Oh, you mean people that live here?
Yes, I live here.
Well, do you know why, George?
Because it's everywhere.
Right. It's like when people come in and they go, I want to meet a winemaker, and I take them next door. I'm like, there's my neighbor. They're a winemaker.
Correct.
And they go, here's my other neighbor. Also a winemaker.
Sure. So in Sonoma, when people do talk, residents, when people do talk about wine, it sounds like this. You see this bottle here? This is a $50 bottle, but I got it for $10
at the end cap
because I know the winemaker.
The friends and family. It fell off a truck, or it was a shiner, or here's a dealio, sir. You're complaining because you can't sell Coles in Newcastle, and because everyone here has wine.
I'm not complaining. It was a joy to travel around America selling wine, and particularly they loved the Count in the South.
Really?
Because there is a thing about Texas, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana. There is a spirit of hospitality that still exists, that is real.
Right.
And they weren't made nervous by people dressing up in this clothing and wearing a top hat. They think it's fun.
They're like, of course.
Yeah, in New Jersey, once again, they don't
get out of here. I ain't got no quarters for you.
I was chased out in New Jersey by a guy who said, "I got no. Is this the wine business? There's a Hollywood. Get out of here." That's a true story.
I feel like he threw like a hoagie at your head or like a piece of pizza or something. Like, get out of here. Can't handle that.
Yeah. Everywhere else, though, they loved the Count, and it was a lot of fun.
Between that, though, George, like so you had the Count, a long and glorious run. The only winemaker, historian, or historical wine brand ambassador to date.
But in a $26 billion industry, I was the only one that had the nerve to sell wine as a historic figure. But the thing is that, Tim, I started selling wine in 1977, when I got a degree of political science from UC Santa Cruz,
Go Slugs,
which made me perfect for the wine industry.
You were you said a poli-sci major?
Well, actually, it was called politics.
Oh, good.
At Santa Cruz, not science, because it's not a science.
It's not a science. People.
No, but I got a politics degree.
Okay.
And then I started working in a wine shop, and I was there for
4 down to Santa Cruz?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was at Ernie's Liquors.
Okay.
And it was a great time, and I learned a lot about wine. And then I sold wine for a distributor for a while. And so I have been in and out of the wine business for over 45 years. I can actually talk about wine. And my whole point was to talk about wine in ways that are enlightening, not talking down to people.
Right.
And also not too much, because, you talk about vineyard, the year, the oak treatment, the malolactic or not malolactic.
You got to say that word.
And explain what that means to people.
Diacetyl or diacetyl. I always mispronounce it.
Well, trichloroanisole, you mean? The chemical compound of a cork bottle?
Well, cork, yeah. See?
Explain all this. And then, I do.
But then do their eyes glaze over like the 5-year-olds?
Well, because I do it in 1 minute. I would give enough for people, the wine guys to go, oh, okay, well, that's, okay, I got that.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that. And then I would tell the story and sing a song.
That's the way to do it.
And here's a song for you. Chardonnay, you are the one. Fabulous, bright, golden liquid. You shine like the sun in the winter or the fall, in the springtime, summer, any time at all. Chardonnay, Chardonnay, you are the best. You simply have much more flavor than all of the rest. Vanilla, apple, and pear, papaya, coconut, butterscotch, buttered toast. Chardonnay.
You're still going.
I've sung that song.
That's the total verse.
I've sung that song.
That's it.
I've sung that song 15,000 times.
Did you write that song?
I wrote the words. It's the tune is night and day.
Night and day. Oh, night and day.
You are the one. So just like
so George, you missed the whole chance to do jazz standard like Pinot Noir to like It Had to Be You or something like that.
My little Pinot, so red, so fine. My little Pinot, won't you be mine tonight? Maybe too late. My little Pinot, it feels like fate. Oh, let my lips embrace you, then I shall slowly taste you. And I taste the wine. Supple, grapey, and delicious, you're mine. Fulfill my wishes from the Russian River Valley or Carneros, where the fog blows. Ask Lord Bacchus, for he knows. Buena Vista makes the finest Pinots. Ta-da.
Can I clap now?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not going to name any other wine varietals for the rest of the podcast because
otherwise you might get another song.
The Great American Songbook will come out.
So when you do parody songs, it's very useful
Right.
to use tunes from the Great American Songbook,
right?
Because then people can play along in their head, sing along with their
right.
minds. If you just have an original tune, it doesn't work that well.
What's going on?
That's
here.
the thing about parodists.
And I had to get the night and day. Which thank you for pointing that out, George. Okay, you've been Count Haraszthy. You've done Mark Twain.
My favorite character. I would rather be Sam Clemens than anybody else. Literally, Tim, when I become Sam Clemens, he takes over. I have the entire afternoon off. He does it all by himself.
Okay.
He's a terrible flirt. He can't help himself.
I shouldn't have mentioned. I feel like I'm in like an exorcism.
I do.
Other characters?
I do share certain personality traits with Sam. After all, I was born modest, but it soon wore off.
George. What? So you do Mark Twain?
You asked me to be here.
That's true.
I mean, it wasn't my idea.
What other characters you got in there?
I have been working on William Tecumseh Sherman for 6 years. I've not done him yet in a public setting, and I look actually more like Sherman than any other character.
Really?
This is Sherman.
You're squinting one eye.
I suggest you surrender Atlanta now.
Yeah, I don't
want to kill all of you.
I don't think this will be a good character to do in the Southeast.
Well, the thing is that Sherman has an importance with Sonoma.
How so?
Sherman was a captain in the U.S. Army in 1847. He came in January 1847, and he came to Sonoma on a day in 1847, and we know the day he visited. It's written in his memoirs, and he visited a specific house that still stands on First Street East.
Really?
So Sherman was here.
Okay.
And Sherman is kind of the Zelig of the 19th century. He was at a lot of important places and continued as an important fellow for 40 years after, 30 after the Civil War. He lived in the 1890s.
Okay.
And he's the one who didn't want to be president. And he famously said, if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve. That's what he said. So I'm Sherman. Haven't done him yet.
Okay.
I've also performed as Charles Krug at Charles Krug Winery.
Okay, and explain who that is.
Charles Krug was the German who was hired by who was taught how to make wine by Count Haraszthy. They became best friends.
Okay.
In fact, when I left Buena Vista, I worked for about 5 months at Charles Krug.
Okay.
Because I love the story.
And it's a famous winery.
Charles, and I was able to have a German accent because I watched Hogan's Heroes.
Authentic Germans.
Hogan. I've done Sam Brannan as well. Sam Brannan, the founder of Calistoga, remarkable character. I love Sam. He was the richest man in Gold Rush, California. And one time he owned 1/4 of Sacramento and 1/5 of San Francisco, and he was making $20,000 a month in the money of the time.
Then, yeah.
$20,000 a month in between 1863 and 68.
Was that like on rent or like on actually producing stuff, or what was he doing?
Rent.
Okay, so he owned land.
And owned land. He sold land, and then he was brought down by alcohol, which is always depressing for someone who also made a brandy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Sam Brannan, Charles Krug.
Well, then my
Mark
first
Twain.
character Tim, was Professor Vine.
Professor Vine.
And I did him because I began working at Sebastiani Winery in 2001. And they let me, very nice people, the Sebastianis, are lovely to have them in our town. And they hired me to give tours, and they let me do Professor Vine. And Professor Vine, this is the voice of Professor Vine. I am Professor Vine. And he has flipped charts and explained wine knowledge in a humorous way.
Gotcha. Like a college professor, obviously. Did you?
Yes.
Did you pattern after?
So you're probably not old enough. But there was a man named called Professor Irwin Corey. Ever heard of him?
No.
Well, you're not quite old enough, Tim, but he
soon as I
was
get
a
that sweet
comedian
Medicaid.
who was on the Tonight Show.
Okay.
When Johnny Carson
I know Johnny
was
Carson.
the host. And he did a wacky professor bit with a mortarboard hat and a scholastic robe and a chart.
Okay.
And it was wordplay and very amusing. And I watched him when I was 8 years old.
Right.
Late at night because my dad would let me stay up and watch. And I went, that guy. And so I've been actually on Tuesday of July 18th, a man named Professor History will perform, and it's going to be, in fact,
Wait, here in Sonoma?
In Sonoma.
Will that person look like you? But
That's
with
me.
a mortarboard?
And so actually he is the latest iteration of the Professor Vine character.
So let's talk about this. Because you started doing these sort of like history, like just come up and I'm going to do a history tour. And now you're doing something new, which is like historical busking.
Yes, my partner C.W. Bayer and I are the first ever of Sonoma history buskers. We busk with history, not music, history, and we busk. We're busking.
How does that? Are you just going to go
passing the hat?
You're going to go to a subway station and start history, but we don't have a subway, so you're just going to go to the plaza
I'm going to the plaza on Tuesday, July 18th at 5:30 in the evening, and something called the 41-minute condensed history of California will take place. A free cultural event.
When do you start in like the geologic age? How much? I mean, 41 minutes is not a lot of time to cover California history.
There's 4 acts, and we go back. The first act is 17,000 years ago, and we meet ancient man in the Sonoma Plaza. And we have a time machine, you see, on stage.
We have a time machine.
An actual
like
time machine.
Wells kind
made
of time
out
machine.
of, well, not as nice as the one they did in the movie, but this is actually made of PVC pipe and shower curtains.
I think it works. Yeah, those work.
And it does work.
Like Peabody
and the motive force of the time machine is, I'm not Mr. Peabody, no, that's a different thing. The motive force of the time machine is drums, rattles, shakers, and ratchets.
Okay.
And audience members will do these things, and that takes me back into time.
And will the original, how long ago did the plaza? 17,000
We go back 17,000 years ago, and then we go to 1579 CE, Common Era, because we no longer use AD.
Right.
Common Era, and that's where we'll meet Reverend Fletcher, who was on board the Golden Hind right after they have been on the coast of Point Reyes and met the inhabitants we now call the coastal Miwok.
Okay, first of all, I believe it was Bodega Bay, and I think you're wrong.
Okay, well, there's a lot of discussion on that to this day.
Including the guy who faked the plaque.
That was an embarrassing and weird story.
Yes.
That fooled the experts for 50 years.
See? A lot of that stuff happens. Okay, so he's getting 1579, this guy Fletcher,
Reverend Fletcher. He was the
arrows,
one. Reverend Fletcher was the one who was the chaplain for Drake, and he wrote in his diary what happened, and so that's how we know what happened when the first Europeans to land in Northern California. What happened when the indigenous people saw them for the first time? First contact.
The first contact with what we now call the coastal Miwok.
Yes.
Because we also have, and you've covered this a lot, and you've been very advocating for a better understanding of actual history, in spite of all your characters.
That's my point.
The Miwok, the Pomo, and the Wapo, and the Patwa.
We go back 17,000 years, so the very first, because that's how long they've been here, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
And
they never left.
But in spite of all your characters, George, you're also quite vocal locally about really examining how we talk about history. All jokes aside, that there are characters, and we examine history often in the United States based upon movies, and we think, oh, that's how history was. But really, that's John Wayne playing a character, an adaptation of something that didn't really happen, but it's a good story. But you've actually, I can say, to your credit, you have been very vocal about we have to re-examine how we look at history in Sonoma. You know, you're not talking California. You're like the mission, the whole experience with the Europeans, and the contact with the Native Americans here. So I give you credit because you are. I know, in spite of your recent performance here, you're actually pretty vocal about these things.
I don't work for anyone but myself now.
And you got opinions.
So I can say whatever I want. And I believe that the truth is important.
Right.
And I did the Bear Flag Revolt reenactment in this town from 2004 till 19. And in that year, 2019, the world changed.
Right.
And seemingly around the world, people said, you know, those Civil War statues, they're sort of bad and they should come down.
Right.
And then we, meaning society, began reevaluating many things. And I believe that every generation has the ability and the necessity of looking to the past and reordering how they view the past in gradations of morality.
But and that's a great insight, because when you're studying AP U.S. history, you think this is received wisdom, this is history that has come down from historians. Then 50 years down the road, you're like, well, actually, we found more information, or we were able to understand this, or we translate something, and history changes. And you can fight against that.
History keeps changing all the time.
It's how we interpret it, and often the person writing the history, and who's not writing the history, and who they're writing about, and who they're not writing about. We do have to kind of reset and think, what are the stories and what's true, and how it's being presented. But
all good points, Mr. Tim. And we know a lot about what happened, particularly in early California, because the mission fathers, the Franciscan fathers, were highly educated from Spain.
Right.
And they were very literate. And they wrote volumes
Right.
of in their diaries and letters, and so I use these letters. So the point is to not use someone else's interpretation, but go to the letters themselves.
Right. Go to the original
and the
documents.
diary entries themselves.
And you're absolutely right that an organization, in this case the Spanish Catholic Church, that had, they were a worldwide corporation. So they had incredible communication and logistics, which helps you in your historical record.
So we actually know a great deal about what happened.
Right.
And in the 1890s into the 1930s, and really until today, something called the mission myth was born.
Remember, what was that?
And the mission myth was the notion that the Franciscan fathers were well-meaning and kind and lovely people who were leading Native American indigenous people in California toward God in kind and considerate ways, and it was all a happy place.
Right.
And in fourth grade, for the last 100 years, people made missions.
You make a mission out of sugar
and
cubes.
they presented this image, and to some degree, this was a real estate scheme begun to sell real estate in Southern California, and the typical tiled roof, white buildings that are the mission revival style, the curved windows and doors,
Right.
which are reminiscent of the church bell, the curve of the bell. Our own city hall has that, the curved bell.
Right.
And so this notion of a happy life for heathen Native Americans being led towards civilization and knowledge of the right way to live was created out of whole cloth. If you go back to the original people who visited, the French, the Russians, the English, in 1786, a man named Jean-Louis Pérouse was on a 3-year voyage around the world, and he was a French explorer.
Okay.
And he had 5 ships, and he went from France across the Atlantic, visited slave plantations in the West Indies and St. Domingo, went all around the tip of South America, and visited Santa Clara Mission, and was horrified by what he saw. And in fact, described the missions as being worse than the slave plantations. Because you see, in the slave plantations, the enslaved African people had value. So they weren't worked to death or whipped overtly. But in the California missions, they would just go out and get more. And they weren't believed to be human unless they fully became Christians. So we'll be talking about these difficult issues
in the condensed history.
In the
You're
condensed
gonna cover.
history.
I mean, this is so. What I like is that you're fun. You're lively, but you're also talking about the hard parts of history that should be talked about, so people can have an understanding of history, and chart our next course.
Well, it has to start with a true understanding of what happened, and to remind ourselves that going back in between the 1780s and the 1830s, many people understood the missions were a bad thing. That's not new.
Right.
The historical record was altered for the benefit of certain elements of society.
50-year look back, the looking and saying, this
here's
is how
another
we read
example.
history.
Another example. In the Mississippi River Valley, the early French explorers had a different relationship with the Native American nations that they encountered.
Right.
And when France sent their young men into the New World, they sent bachelors, young men, unmarried. Right. And they said to them, you're not coming back. And you shall intermarry with the native peoples, and your progeny will be French people. They will be French citizens.
Interesting.
And the Spanish had a lesser way, and the English completely different way to look at it.
Have you? This is kind of going sideways. Yeah. I'd look at the book, but I read American Nations: A History of the 11 Rival Regional Cultures of North America. Talks about the French, the Yankeedom, the Spanish. There's these different regions of the United States that had these different values.
Sure.
And like it's a really, what you're talking about. He covers this in that book. It's
so what happened in specifically with the French is that what they used to call a polyglot culture was, where a blending of the French technology and way of life and the Native American way of life, they got along really very well. And loving, wonderful family units were created. And that all of that, and they were highly educated. Some of them went back to France and were learned from universities there, and they were not looked down upon by the local culture. And after the Civil War, people went back and removed names from church records. They rewrote history.
They expunged
to make that it was called miscegenation.
Yeah,
the blending of the blood
of supposed racism.
And of course America, to its horror, was a leader in the 1920s of the eugenics movement.
Oh, right.
And so once again, history is not easy to talk about.
Right, but it's important to talk about.
Well, we have to talk about it because we have to know how it got here.
Right.
How do we get here?
Right.
How can we get out of this situation we're in today? It begins with understanding how we got here.
Right.
And history is not easy to understand. It is complicated. History is the gray area. And so my way of dealing with these topics is to try to make it sort of funny and fast-paced and humorous
to draw people
to leaven out the horror of the truth.
Okay.
So that hopefully people won't run screaming from the auditorium, from the amphitheater on July 18th at 5:30.
And you're going to do, hopefully this isn't the first one, you're going to do more, not the last one, you're going to do more of these, I hope.
Well, this is part one.
If you get arrested by the code enforcement guy in the plaza. Do they know about this, George?
They know exactly what's going to happen? No, they do not.
I love this even better. I love this.
Well, there's an old saying, always better to ask forgiveness than permission. And lovely people here in town. I think that Sonomans are ready to hear the truth.
It'll be good. Okay.
But I'm not completely sure about that.
If people want, because and before we get into our next section here, you also, in addition to being a freelance on the street historian, busker,
this is not gonna air till July 19th. Is that correct?
No, it'll be up pretty soon. I think. So it'll.
But no one actually watches your show. Is that right?
Just my dad and my mom.
I feel better now.
Get out of here. And 300 bots on TikTok will watch this because I buy the traffic later. George, it's a joke.
I'm not worried about the bots.
That's a joke. All right, here. You also run a radio show. You run a scripted Western radio show.
Darn true.
You are also you help out with CW's music show sometimes.
I run the board for CW, a remarkable musician.
You are not just a guy who plays a guy who got eaten by a crocodile, or a guy who marched from Atlanta to the sea, or a guy that wrote The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County. You're all those.
Nice recitation of the previous people.
There we go.
Wow, you're on fire today, Tim.
But you are also
more than that.
You are also heard on the airwaves. You are a morning show host at KSVY.
Love KSVY. Okay. We are so fortunate to have this radio station. I've been on KSVY since September 2004.
Okay.
With my radio theater of the Wild West Sunday nights at 6:00.
The only scripted regular radio show I hear.
I don't know anyone else who writes a 6,000 word script every week
with different 3 characters, 4 characters.
I've got there's like 13 characters.
Different voices. Now. It's everything. It's like
a
real radio show.
I have 2 wonderful voiceover actors who perform with me, CW and then Butch Engel.
Okay.
Butch Engel, the remarkably talented voiceover actor who actually has an agent.
Oh, really?
He's legit.
He's
voice
real.
actor.
Okay. You don't have an agent?
No.
I'll be your agent. George, if people want more information about how to get a hold of George Weber, the historian, do you have a website or something?
Oh, I do. It's very simple. It's called georgeweber.com.
Okay.
Weber with 2 B's. Couldn't be easier.
And George spelled with George?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe it's different, like George.
George
Weber.
And then my email, which is always good, is also easy. George@georgeweber.com.
That's very good. That's good. George, in spite of this incredibly amazing and entertaining conversation we've had.
Yes.
and all the different characters. I'm sure you're going to pull out another character, so I got to hurry up before you become Sarah Winchester or something. But here's my question.
Don't do her, no.
It's going to happen. You need to help me answer some questions because we have 2 visitor centers, as you know. One in the plaza, one in the south part here at Vianza Winery.
True.
People come up and ask us questions on Facebook and whatever.
Sure.
And you're going to be a volunteer for a moment and help me answer some questions.
Go right ahead.
And it's a segment that we call We Get Questions.
Okay.
Here we go. You ready? You haven't seen these. You
have not
you
seen
literally.
these.
I mean, I've got them right here. If you want to look at them,
Not seen these at all.
I'm just gonna rattle them off. Okay. So
Okay.
here's
Go
literally
ahead.
a question I got today from a guy named Dave. I live in San Francisco, and 2 of my friends are visiting from Minnesota. We want to go wine tasting, but not have to spend a lot of money since they are new to wine. His friends, they're teachers from Minnesota. We also want to do a picnic somewhere. Any ideas?
Yes. Okay. Go to Nevada County.
George, I swear to God.
Sorry.
Go to Nevada County.
Sorry.
Brought to you by the Nevada Irrigation District and Tourism Office.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I'll try to answer that question in ways that your clients that are members of the Visitors Bureau.
I'm going to give you, okay. if you had 2 friends from Iowa coming to visit, assuming you had 2 friends and they're from Iowa, they didn't want to spend $50 per tasting, what would you do?
Well, I think that Buena Vista's $25, and that's a great deal. Mm-hmm. Certainly don't go over to Napa. They've gone mad with the pricing. Mm-hmm. And so I like Vianza is a beautiful place. I don't know what their tastings are.
Right.
I'm a big fan of Gloria Ferrer.
Okay, sparkling wine.
Their spark is a beautiful place to visit. Mm-hmm. Gloria Ferrer has a wonderful view out over Carneros, and you can have a self-guided tour that shows how they make the sparkling wine there.
Okay.
I don't think it's terribly expensive to taste there. We have a lot of smaller wineries that you can make reservations at. I think if they go to a great website on the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau, well, they probably can find some suggestions. Wonderful people there, actually.
Wait a minute. I love this because now we're imagining you're working at the visitor center and you're saying, but go to the website. But you're right. You're right.
Well,
no, you're right. You're right. So
the thing is, the reason why you got that email is that the biggest change in tourism over the last 20 years is that unlike 20 years ago, people are already have their trip planned out.
They really do.
It's just, you can't overstate that. I mean, they've got it hour by hour.
So
So the thing about like concierge is unnecessary now.
Although it's funny because I was talking to the concierge, Laura, over at the lodge. They have real-time information. They know who's open.
They're very good. No, they're very good.
But that's my point. It's like we were laughing because someone will come up to us and say, we got everything fine. I'm like, okay. And they'll walk away. And they're going to go to a restaurant. And I'm like, they're closed today.
I know, yeah.
They're not open.
But, when I began my General Vallejo walking tour to Sonoma Plaza, I was sent people by concierges every day. Mm-hmm. And because they took my tour.
Right.
And they knew what I did.
Right.
And now I know there's a few concierges left, and it drives them crazy. They will give them hard-earned, great knowledge, and as they walk away, they're looking at the phone as if the people that don't know anything would know more than them. It drives these wonderful people nuts. It really does.
If I wouldn't listen to random
to
people
answer your question, I would say Buena Vista, Gloria Ferrer, Vianza is a lovely place.
Good one.
And then go up the valley. St. Francis is a beautiful place.
That's cool. And you can also walk in the vineyard.
Yeah, so when people want to visit a wine country, they want to go down and walk in a vineyard.
They want to see grapes.
Yeah, and so what you do is at St. Francis, you walk. You could get a glass of wine, and it's really good. Then it's not terribly expensive, and you walk down, and you walk right up down into the vineyard, and then you look up at the caldera, the most impressive feature of the Sonoma Valley, the half blown away volcano.
No longer active.
It's not active now. No.
Thank you.
Mount Konocti is active. in Lake County.
Very far away from here, George.
Yeah, you don't need to worry. It last went up 11,000 years ago. Unlikely to do so now.
I feel like that's going to be in your condensed history of California.
No.
Okay.
No, but so those are some answers for you.
Where's a good place for a picnic?
The best place to have a picnic in the Sonoma Valley is at Bartholomew Park. And that is not far from the plaza. You could drive there in 7 minutes. And there are picnic tables on this hillside where the nudist colony was between 1929 and 1946. And you're looking out over the valley, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And you could get a bottle of wine from the Bartholomew Park Estate Winery.
Okay.
Or you could bring your own.
Right.
And you can have a picnic there.
Right there.
And it is the best. It's just gorgeous. The valley stretches out below you. There's some places that have nice shady trees over the picnic tables. So that's the best place for a picnic. Or the plaza has many tables. Or bring a blanket and just lie down and enjoy our magnificent plaza.
Well, thank you. I like that. If I go up to the that park you mentioned, Bartholomew Park, keep my clothes on nowadays. The nudist colony is no longer there.
Yes, that is true.
The Sonoma nudist colony.
Sonoma, yeah, it was
still my favorite.
Biggest nudist colony on the West Coast between 1920 and 1946.
George, another
1,200 naked people in the 1930s there every weekend.
You can picture it now. Another question for you. Where's a good place for live music?
Murphy's, great venue for live music. Mm-hmm. The Speakeasy on the plaza, another really fantastic venue. Those are the best places that are in the plaza, or in the plaza adjacent, on the plaza.
They could be anywhere.
Palooza, Kenwood has got good live music. Great venue. We really are blessed with over 25 live performances every weekend.
Every week.
Thursday, in the Sonoma Valley.
There's live music up in Glen Ellen. Tuesday, the market.
One reason why my pal CW moved here 2 years ago, a professional musician from Nevada, he moved here. He was amazed. True story. He bought this house on the west side, and he actually had never seen or knew about the plaza. When he bought this house, he was living in Santa Rosa.
What?
He never did. I just learned today. He came to town. He got this house. It was a great house.
It's literally in the middle of town.
He'd never been there. And he said, someone said, well, you should go visit the plaza. Oh, what's that? And he went, oh my, why, this is perfect for buskers, which he is.
Yeah, he plays
and
quite
so
good,
there you are.
banjo. Okay.
So we're just very fortunate to have so much live music and so many musicians.
A lot of them.
And I guarantee you, there will be no bad musicians in this town because the overall level is so high.
Right, we chase the bad ones out. Like, get out of here. Go to Santa Rosa.
Well, there's no one will hire them or let them play for free.
Here's another question we got. I have a group coming in for a conference. I think it would be fun to do something outdoors, like at night, that involves marveling at the heavens above. Are there any places that we can do that?
Well, the Ferguson Observatory would come to mind.
The Robert Ferguson Observatory.
Which is glorious beyond belief.
Yeah.
And it might be possible for a group to have someone open the place up for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is Team Sugarloaf.
They can do it.
And they are in favor of money.
So what
to keep Sugarloaf Ridge going.
You are right.
They might be able, if they had enough league time. I mean,
they do. There's an
because it's probably because this is a year from. They could come up with a wonderful evening for that group.
Right.
And it's not that far a walk from the parking lot up there. It's gorgeous beyond belief, and they could look. Not just observe the heavens, but look at them through telescopes.
You're right. So
that would be fun.
You're right. The Robert Ferguson Observatory.
Yeah.
And that's actually a private nonprofit inside Sugarloaf, which is itself run by another nonprofit.
Yes.
And they will work with you. People can talk about the planets. You can go up there. A lot of times they have the telescopes out, like you said, in the parking lot, as well as the enormous telescope.
It's a wonderful group. We are really rich with nonprofits. Yeah,
that's kind of cool. Yeah.
We have more nonprofits than anywhere in the world.
Per capita, yes. Almost, yes. I'm going to stick by that. Yeah, it's certainly.
And yes.
You heard it here.
I have several myself.
Here's one we got. People come up and they ask us these questions, right? They just walk up and ask us this question. Final question we got was, I heard that the bear on the California flag is the result of a mix-up, and the original intent was for the flag to be a pear. This would make us the pear flag republic and also have the secondary positive effect that encourage kids to eat locally grown fruits. Is this a true story?
This is almost certainly a ringer or a made-up question.
George, people ask us questions. This is called We Ask Questions. Why would I make up a question about
because it sounds silly?
About the pear flag revolt?
I can attest to you in all truthfulness that is completely not true. The bear flag.
Yeah, supposedly
so the flag was made by William Todd, and he wasn't made until a couple days after June 14th, 1846. It wasn't made the day of the revolt. And we don't know why William Todd, the nephew of Mary Todd Lincoln, chose a bear as the symbol of the California Republic. We know that he put a star in the upper left-hand corner because that is reminiscent of the Texas Republic.
Got it.
That had a single star, the Lone Star State. And that Lone Star was first used by the Republic of West Florida in 1812. The Bonnie blue background, red star, and that was when the filibusters moved into Spanish Western Florida, told the authorities they would abide by all the laws, and within 3 years decided that that Spanish were terrible, and then fomented a revolution, which is what happened in Texas in 1836, and what happened in California in 1846. Direct sequence. And
like a line.
And by the way, there is a book on this subject that will come out as soon as I write it.
Okay, that's good. So you're saying it's not true, as far as you know.
Not true. There's no pear. That's all about Atlanta. The peaches, not pears.
But
peaches.
But George, if it was true, think about it. It would have been the University of California, the Cal pears, and the big game would be against the Stanford tree and Cal pears. I think that would be quite the big game here in the Bay Area. But you're telling me it's not true.
Tim, your interesting and humorous questions almost are more than one can imagine.
George, you have been a wonderful guest. And you are fantastic. Thank you for coming on. I just want to again reiterate, if people want more information about George Weber, where do they go?
Well, georgeweber.com. And to this day, Tim, I do offer a tour called the Locals History Tour of the Sonoma Plaza, Sundays at 10 a.m. And it's $20. It's a very expensive amount of money. And
you can say it's $20.
And I'll do it for one person, and often do.
Okay. So
it's 10 a.m.
It's an affordable walking tour.
It is, okay. and you'll meet me, and it's 90 minutes.
Great.
And so that's the best deal in town.
I love that.
No
okay.
doubt about it.
And that information is at
georgeweber.com.
And sometimes at other places too. So SonomaValley.com if you have deals, special events.
True.
They could look there. So
there's a wonderful website there, SonomaValley.com.
I'm sorry, George, one more time. What was that?
SonomaValley.com.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, rate us, tell your friends. George, thanks for coming. We'll see you later.
My pleasure.